and there's a guy sitting at the bar. He said, there's people lying on the ground, and this guy has his back to me at the bar. He said, I saw his hand on a weapon. Welcome back. I'm Michael Joy. This is Absolute Joy. As a young man, I didn't have the confidence to really assert myself or even say to anybody what I believed. And I think that came from being a dyslexic as a child. I really felt that I was learning disabled. My brother and sister were like sailing through school. My brother was like a social humorist. He was great. He was the most popular guy in high school. My sister was the academic. Every time through school, I came up after them. And the teachers were always like, oh, your sister's a genius. Oh, your brother's hilarious. And I'm like, I'm in the lowest reading class. So I felt very disadvantaged in my emotional state. You fast forward that into college, where I was again in a very unfamiliar territory. I showed up at art school. It was survival by day one. Later in art school, there came an opportunity to get these internships as teachers begin to inform you of these programs. And I got an internship I was studying photography at the Art Institute at this point, photographic conservationist. Somebody told me about this, and I went to meet the guy, Murray Mattinson. He was kind of this short, fat guy with a beard and angry about everything. He looked like an angry Albert Einstein. I was like, what is with this guy? But basically I had 2 days a week with him. And although I was doing some tedious work, restoring old collections from museums, and so we'd scan these negatives by hand, but we'd talk on and on and on for hours. I think he sensed that I was a nice, good-natured kid, but he was like, you gotta know how to stand your own. I'm like, why are you so angry, man? Why are you always fighting? He would tell me these stories. He killed his first man when he was 17. He lied to the military to get in. He did not have a happy home life. I said, how is this possible? He said, they made me an MP on the base right away. He said, when in basic training, the first time we had a break, all these guys took their money and they went and bought booze and things like this. He said, I went and I bought a manual to learn my rights. He said, my whole family was lawyers. And so he said, I was never intimidated by the rules because I knew them better than the other people. He said, however, in this instance, I got called to a Navy bar on the base. I don't know what that meant, but it's where the MPs are involved, not the police. And I go there and there's a guy sitting at the bar. He said, there's people lying on the ground. And this guy has his back to me at the bar. He said, I saw his hand on a weapon. I just followed procedure. I sat there, said, drop the weapon, turn around slowly. I get the chills. And he said the guy didn't respond after time and time again. And he turned around with the gun and he said, I blew his head off. And then I called the commanding officer. I said, get over here right now. There's 3 dead people. The guy had killed 2 other people. If I'm remembering the story correctly, the commanding officer showed up and I said, what did you do? And he said, I threw my gun at him and I threw up. And I said, how could you put a kid in this position? So this is how his life went. He later went to Vietnam and he had some things about him that made him prime for a certain job. He was very young. He was a black belt martial artist. I think he had short guy syndrome where he always had to be tougher than someone else. And he was very good at photography ever since he was little. So he knew his way around in the dark with dark rooms. Well, in Vietnam, how does that translate? You're small, you can fit in the tunnel, you're good with your hands, and you're good in the dark. You can't use a gun in the tunnel because the flash would give away your location. He never told me a story about that. He just said it's not good. He said, you go into that space and you know there's only one resolution, and he said you can end up having to kill somebody that moment. It was so hard to hear, and I started talking to him about Vietnam, and I said, how did you come home and you're not crazy after these things? And he said, oh, I was. I just decided that he said, cognitively, he said, I can either be crazy for the rest of my life or I can manage something. And he said, I'm crazy inside. He said, don't be fooled. But I found a way to focus on these other things that I'm doing. I don't know how he did it. He kept parlaying his skills. After the war, he was a sheriff. He was a school teacher. He said teaching was easy for him because he taught in a really bad area. And the kids used to think, he said, I just took down a few kids and then I had their respect. He was that kind of guy. I just got to the point where the stories that were fascinating became tragic to me. And I thought every single step of the way you had to fight. He enrolled in school, in college, to get a degree in photography. In his last year of school, they said that degree is no longer being offered, and that's when he had to sue the school to get his degree. He had many, many stories about all these crazy things they did in college and the photo shoots. His idea of a good photo shoot was he would get a portrait assignment, and then when his friends were shagging, he would photograph them in the moment of orgasm, and it would click, there's a portrait, and he'd put them up in the class, and the teacher would be like, So you can see he was a rebel. I think he was a terrible parent. I met his son, Max. Murray is dead for some time now. He was married to this over-the-top Russian lady. Max used to come to the photo studio and would just run around like a terror, and Murray couldn't control him. There's a part of it that he didn't want to control him, and there's a part of it where he was like, Max! But the parenting styles between the dad and the mom were so different that I don't know how much therapy their son had to have. Clearly, mom was a genius and dad was a genius in their own right. I just thought, I need to take a little bit from him and then let go of the rest. But I carried his anger flag forward in 1 or 2 years of art school when I was very confrontational, and it felt good and I felt like I was winning and woo, woo, woo. And then I was just like, this isn't healthy. I remember critiques where people knew would end up crying, and it was just not, I feel bad about that. I changed my tune. I decided that there had to be another way. I didn't get to it right away, but I opted for something different that's more like who I am today. Murray's crazy was Murray's crazy. I didn't need to be crazy for Murray. It needed to stop there. And I was very, very captivated by this very strong man's story, and my dad was not present, and I didn't know how to identify to the strength of a man, and so I kind of absorbed too much. I never was violent or anything like that, but I would talk shit, art shit. That's as tough as I got. I can talk tough in the art critique room. The life lesson is, yes, Murray was a mentor of mine, but really I could learn from him without being what he was teaching me. I could learn from him by the result of what he'd gone through. What that means is I looked at how his experience shaped him, and I just extracted pieces from it. Like, oh, there's the value in this. I didn't need the volume of his experience. When working with a mentor, remember, it's their experience that they had. Their advice is only relevant to, usually only relevant to their particular experience. And their experience is based on all the decisions they made, how they were brought up. His advice was not necessarily my advice, and yet there were things that he said that were valuable. Always frame someone's advice from their perspective of why they're saying what they're saying. I'm like, well, you killed people, I haven't. You're gonna have different advice. People have attacked you, they haven't attacked me. I'm gonna have a different take on it. I don't think that fear is the basic tenet of mentoring. Well, some stories, as you see in business and the journey from it, involve meeting some unique people, and sometimes stories come together and they meet well, and it's like two pieces of fabric being sewn together, and there's value in that. There's strength in that sail, that wind that sail can catch. And other times there's stories that just it's like a magnetic, it doesn't work. But understanding why I was repelled from certain things became valuable also. I learned to stay away from certain things that I absorbed too deeply because I was very open and I needed to filter. So filter the people around you in the ways that work for you. For me, I still do it to this day. Filter different people different ways according to where I am on a given day. So it's not advice, it's just how I roll. This was absolute joy, a little bit of sad joy, but not anymore. That was an old sad. I am extremely happy of where things are today, and I can't wait to tell you some more stories. But there will be a few that are, kind of spicy sad. So thanks for joining.